Hello, and welcome to today's Heart and Stroke webinar. I will now welcome Natalie Gierman, Senior Manager of Health Systems Research and Health Initiatives at Heart and Stroke.
Thanks, Kristen. So I'm going to be moderating the webinar today. I just want to start with an acknowledging the land on which I sit here in Toronto. It is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Mississauga, and Haudenosaunee. And we share this acknowledgement to show our commitment to reconciliation, as well as deepening our awareness and understanding of Indigenous history and perspectives. And I ask you to also reflect on that wherever you're joining us from across Canada today. So something that I wanted to tell you about before we start on our webinar is that we've been working across the country to rapidly bring you information through these very challenging times. And we know that COVID-19 has had an impact on everybody, but including our heart and stroke community. And we want to know what you're experiencing right now. If you're somebody who's experienced heart condition, stroke, vascular cognitive impairment, or you're a caregiver that is looking after somebody that has experienced these things, we really want to understand what you're going through. And you might ask us, what are we going to do with that information? It's incredibly important for us to understand your experience. It helps inform our reports. It helps inform content on our website. And most importantly, it helps us set our priorities going forward. So please take the time to do the survey. It takes about 15 minutes. Apparently, if you do the survey, you are entered into a draw to win a Heart and Stroke hoodie, which has a similar look and feel to this fantastic t-shirt that I'm wearing today. So thank you for that. I also wanted to let you know that starting next Thursday, we're starting a new webinar series. It's a Q&A format called Ask the Expert. And the first topic will be on mental health, and then we'll follow with additional topics, including recreation, leisure, and exercise, medications, and nutrition. So you'll see invitations for that in your email, but also make sure that you watch our social media channels, which is Facebook and Twitter. So I know that most of you joining us today have a much deeper understanding of aphasia than I do, but just to get us all on the same page, when we talk about aphasia, we talk about problems with communication post-stroke. It may make it hard for people to think, it may make it hard for people to communicate, share thoughts, and join in conversations. But something that I wanted us to be mindful of as we work through all of the content today is just to consider and remember and acknowledge that people living with aphasia, they know what's going on around them. They have opinions on issues. They want to socialize. They want to communicate with us, and they want to be able to make decisions for themselves. So just something to keep in mind as we move through. We put this webinar together because we heard from you that many of you with social distancing are feeling isolated. You may have increased stress, and we wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that and that we helped you understand what tools and resources and techniques are out there to make this a little bit easier on you and your loved ones. We know that many community resources are closed right now. Not everybody's been able to get up on virtual platforms, so that can be extremely isolating for many of us. And you might also be physically distanced from your loved one who might still be in an acute care setting. So we also want to talk to you a little bit about advocating on their behalf. So I just mentioned most of these topics. We have 4 amazing speakers joining us today, and our first speakers are Glenn and Judy Hilton, and they are joining us from Saskatoon, and they're here to generously share their experience as someone who's a care supporter for someone living with aphasia and someone living with aphasia, and how they're coping with communication through COVID-19. So I'm going to ask Glenn and Judy to turn their audio on, and I will move your slides for you.
So we are Glenn and Judy Hilton. We live in Saskatoon. Judy had a hemorrhagic stroke February 3rd, 2007. She was 59 years old. She was a mom, she was a grandmother, she was a professional clown, and during a professional clowning performance, she had this stroke. She was in hospital for about 2.5 months, and during that time, she had, we had a lot of, our initial reaction was, you can change the slide. Our initial reaction was a lot of fear and anxiety, sadness, and depression, anger. And what we discovered through time was that these are okay and these are normal feelings. And we needed to take our time to go slow, to move through the difficult time that we were going to be facing. We also learned that we can't expect to do things the way you want to do them. Things don't always work that way, and we need to take one day at a time. Judy couldn't talk. Initially, she couldn't walk. She couldn't care for herself. And our fear and our concern was, what are we going to do with our situation? We learned we had to do everything we possibly could to get help, to find resources, to make the effort. And if you're going to make any headway, you have to go after it yourself. So one of our big thing was to reach out to the rehab people in Saskatoon. We feel that we were so very fortunate to live in Saskatoon, where they have all the services and specialties and the resources that we need. So not only in the hospital, but also in the community, we found retreads program, aphasia program, swimming programs, speech language assistance from wherever we could find it. In fact, 13 years after the stroke now, we still go back to the rehab folks at City Hospital here in Saskatoon. And the way I put it is, Judy needs a tune-up. So we go back for tune-up for physio and for whatever services that we need, and we can still do that. Some of the tools that have helped us at home, one of the speech therapists that we had at City Hospital shortly after the stroke recommended that we look at the program called Prolo-Co to Go. I know it's kind of a, it's on the screen there. It's a kind of an expensive program, but it's basically a speech app that helps Judy communicate when she can't talk. And the reason I'm talking is that Judy has aphasia and she has trouble getting the words out. One thing I found is the best way to really find out what she's thinking or feeling is to make her mad. And she can make it very plain to me what her problem is once she's mad at me. But anyway, Prolo-Co to Go is a really good program. It's expensive, but it's a very worthwhile program. A couple of other programs, talk path therapy and language therapy are programs that she can use on her iPad or iPhone, and they're very helpful for practicing speech. The technology that we found useful, her iPad and iPhone are inseparable from her. She uses them all the time and helps her communicate. She can put her words into the iPad, and the iPad will speak for her when she's struggling. A couple of programs that she's taken recently from a local speech language pathologist. She took a program called Drawing for Aphasia, and I wondered what that was all about and how would that be useful. And yet, what I found she's doing all the time now is drawing. Whenever she can't get the words out, she can quickly draw you a picture that will allow you to get the information that she needs. She's also taken a class called Book Club. It's not a class, they did a book club together. 4 people with aphasia got together with a speech language pathologist, and they studied the book together. And you can imagine the conversations that they would have, 4 people with different levels of aphasia speaking to each other. The other thing that we've took last year, the University of Alberta and the March of Dimes puts on an aphasia camp, 80 people with aphasia came together with their caregivers and so on, and spent the weekend in Alberta doing speech and just learning to communicate with each other. It was a wonderful program. Of course, once you start these things, at least with Judy, once you start her doing anything, she never wants to quit. So I think we're lifelong members of the University of Alberta aphasia camp from now on. Judy is 72 years old. She is now an accomplished artist. She took up art after her stroke, and that's become her replacement, her artistic replacement for clowning. And that's something she gets a lot of pleasure from. She shows a lot of her artwork. You can change the slide now. Previously, she was right-handed, and now she's left-handed. And now she paints with a group of 12 other artists, none of whom have aphasia. And the social interaction among these 12 people is just amazing to see her communicate with them and do her art. She loves to paint, she loves to create, and that's what she's doing all the time now. When Judy first had her stroke, one of the things that we discovered in her hospital stay was that nobody gave us the goods on what it's like to live with stroke after. We got lots of information from social workers and PTs and OTs and speech language pathologists, but we never heard anybody talk about their story and what it's like to live with stroke. So I approached the hospital and suggested that they do that, and of course they recruited us. And so ever since then, Judy goes to the hospital regularly and shares her story with new stroke victims and their families, and we talk about what it's like to live with stroke. And that's become really important for us to share that story, because we knew what we missed out on, and we knew how much people need the help in dealing with their fear and anxiety and concern and so on. So we do that regularly. In doing that, we also ran into two situations where Judy is now putting herself out there for the University of Saskatchewan medical student education programs that she does through City Hospital as well. And so she gets to work with medical students, first and second year medical students, and talking about and showing them what it's like to deal with stroke and what it's like to deal with aphasia, and with her right side is affected, so the physical parts of that as well. We've started to work with the physiotherapy school at the University of Saskatchewan, where she goes and deals with first year physiotherapy students in checking their skills. They do assessments on her and see how they can help her, and she shows them what it's like to deal with the effects of stroke. So those are two really good things. We've also become involved with the Heart and Stroke Foundation as far as being on an advisory panel and doing stuff like that. So we found that being busy and being out there is really important for us, for Judy, and for making progress every day. And if anybody ever tells you that you don't make progress after a short period of time following stroke, that's not true. Judy is 13 years post-stroke, and she still makes progress every day and gets better all the time. So thank you very much.
Thank you to them again for all of the resources and tools that you shared with us, as well as your experience, and just wanted to acknowledge how beautiful Judy's artwork is and how talented she is. So our next guest is Evelyn Weger. She's a registered social worker at the Aphasia Center of Ottawa, and she runs a variety of programs there, including care support groups for caregivers, as well as couples counseling. So thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you very much for having me today. Just a little bit of background for people who are on the line. I started my first experience actually working with someone who has had a stroke. It was actually at the Stollery Children's Hospital in Edmonton about 17 years ago. My first experience was with a 3-year-old. And that was the first time I'd ever seen someone who had a stroke that resulted in aphasia as well as hemiplegia, and quite a miraculous recovery. Right, little brains are growing all the time. So I got interested in the brain like I said, at that time. I relocated to Ottawa, and I was the neurology social worker at the Civic Hospital, which is the stroke center of Eastern Ontario. And I was in that job for about 11 years. And so probably 85% of my day I spent working alongside people who had had strokes, and then with their families and caregivers as well. 2 years ago, I left the Ottawa Hospital and went to work at the Aphasia Center of Ottawa, where I'm very, very fortunate to work with another social worker, as well as 3 speech pathologists and 3 communication rehabilitation disorders assistants. And so we have such a great team there. So today, what I wanted to talk about was communication and attachment, and specifically that attachment, it's kind of a way of looking at relationships. And so the quote that you see in front of you is from Sue Johnson. She is a very accomplished psychologist. And what Sue is saying is, from cradle to grave, human beings are hardwired to seek not just social contact, but also physical and emotional proximity to special others who are deemed irreplaceable. What does that mean? It means that we need each other. And so, especially after experiencing a stroke or some other type of neurodegenerative disease that may be affecting your language, people need to have connections with their partners, with close friends, with families, people that they can rely on to create a secure base. When we feel secure, then things seem to be a little bit easier. And not to say that it's simple, but someone's got your back. Okay, change the slide. Thank you. So in terms of attachment, what can that look like? So really, there's many ways that we connect with special people in our lives. So the first picture is touch. So we may hold someone's hand, we may reach out and tap somebody on the shoulder. During these times of COVID, it's really difficult to have any kind of physical touch unless someone's living right in your home. But I know for some of the people that I work with, they have family members that walk down the street, stop at the driveway, kind of wave. They may call out to each other, or they may connect, by Zoom, by using a camera like we're doing today. Other ways for attachment is sometimes within our own homes, is to let somebody help us. So it may be that when you're cooking, that somebody's peeling vegetables beside you. There's no talking going on, but you're connecting because you're actually helping each other. And then the third idea is of affirmations. We all like to hear that people notice when we do something special for them, or when we just do something for them. I hear sometimes that for caregivers that there's a struggle, when your loved one is not able to say thank you. I notice that you've taken on a lot more in the home, or I really appreciate the meals you make me, right? So sometimes affirmations, it may not be what you heard before. So it may not be the thank yous, but it might be a smile. It may be, again, just a touch. It may be just somebody that, when they're eating something, they just say, right? So just some kind of connection. Next slide. Thanks. During COVID, I think we're all probably spending a lot more time with the people that are in our homes. So time is very, very precious, and something that I actually, I just got off a video conference with my group that I'm running, and one of the ladies, what she said was, I really appreciate that my husband, so she's the person who has aphasia, and she's saying, I really appreciate the time that I have with my husband. Our world seems like it's slowed down, and it's now actually at my speed. It's at my aphasia speed. And so, time is something to really recognize, not just the time we spend, but even how fast we all move in our lives. But time together, it may look like sitting in your living room, just sitting side by side and watching something on TV together. It may be that you get to go for a walk around the block. It may be, again, making meals together, but it's just that time that we spend with each other. And then, of course, a little bit harder during COVID, but what can let us know that people are thinking about us, that they care about us, is for some people gifts, so actual physical things that we may give each other that just let the other person know, I appreciate you, I notice you, you are my person. Okay, next slide. So this is it's just a statement, right? Which is sometimes we need someone to simply be there, not to fix anything or to do anything in particular, but just to keep us or to let us feel that we are cared for and supported. I put this slide in because I think it's really important for all of us to think about how we do spend our time with those that have aphasia or with someone who's had a stroke. Sometimes we get this impression that we have to be doing things. We have to be practicing our talking. We have to practice writing or reading, that there's exercises that we have to be doing. And so I think that sometimes there's a lot of pressure that people feel that they have to do something. And I'm going to suggest to you that that's not always true. Sometimes it's just the connections that we have with that person with aphasia that allows that person to know I'm secure, I'm safe, and everything is okay. My experience as a social worker over the last 15 years of working with people who've had strokes is that people that have strong family or friend connections just seem to do a little better, and I don't know the science behind that. I'm sure there's a big research project I could do, but I just know that it matters. Next slide. Thank you. So I just wanted to bring this out, but I think that Glenn just did a beautiful and actually shared with you a lot of examples of what I'm going to be talking about, which is a strength-based perspective. What this means is you are more than your diagnosis. So if you've been diagnosed and someone has said to you, okay, you've had this kind of stroke, you have these deficits, you've got some hemiparesis, or you have aphasia, that there's all these different things that you might not be able to do. I'm going to say to you, if you can look beyond, whether you're the person with the aphasia or the caregivers, if you can look beyond the diagnosis to what you're able to do, what are your strengths? What are the things that you continue to retain? Those are the things that help to reduce anxiety, depression, frustration, and anger. When we recognize, just as Glenn was talking about Judy, that Judy, what I heard, Judy is an accomplished artist. Judy is able to go to a book club and participate, that you're able to go to a medical school and help future physiotherapists or future doctors just be more skilled, right? So it's really the example that you are so much more than the disease, right, that someone is diagnosed with you or you. And I think the important thing is to look at what are your individual strengths, and this is for the caregivers as well. What are your individual strengths, and then what are your weaknesses? What are the things that you're not quite as good at? And is your partner able to kind of offset some of those weaknesses? So just because someone has had a stroke, it doesn't mean that they've lost all of their abilities. And it's so to really encourage people to be able to do the things that they're able to do, even if it is with some help. But there may be things that they do actually better than the caregivers. So to encourage that. Okay, next slide. So depending on where you are post-diagnosis, this is really important. When people are first diagnosed, you're in the hospital, a doctor comes, and you'll hear, this is you've had a stroke, these are the things that you've lost now. It takes time for people to grieve that diagnosis, to grieve the life that they had before, and to start to come to terms with what that post-stroke life is going to look like. There will be a time, and I would say it's very individual when you are sharing your diagnosis. But what I would encourage is look at the people around you and kind of reach out. Is there one or two people that you trust that if you can share your diagnosis, that they're going to support you, right? They don't have to do things for you, but they're there for you. You know that those are your go-to people. So talk to those individuals. Also talking to your family doctor, letting them know, how are you doing post-stroke? What are the things that you're concerned about? So if there's any kind of mood concerns, behavioral types of things, whatever you're experiencing, be able to reach out and talk to people. The more people you have in your inner circle, the more that attachment helps you to just be able to successfully navigate every day. Okay, next slide. So this is just an app, and I don't know if anyone has ever looked at this, but the Lots of Helping Hands app. It is an app that was developed, I believe, by the Cancer Society, but it is a really great app. Anyone can use it. There's no cost to it, and it allows you actually to invite friends and family to help you in whatever tasks that you need. And you can actually put in, I need groceries picked up on Tuesday, or could I, right now during COVID, we're not doing as many things, but post-COVID, I need a ride to a doctor's appointment. Is somebody available? So it's a great app for that. Also post-COVID more than currently, it's important to be thinking about, do you have all the help that you need? Sometimes we want to be able to say, I can do it all myself. The reality is doing it yourself is exhausting. Next slide. And this is my point to that, is that survival mode is supposed to be a phase that helps save your life. It's not meant to be how you live. This is really important. When you are new in your stroke journey, you've just heard these words, you've had a stroke, you're just starting to learn what kind of deficits you might be living with at that moment. I think we all become quite hyper vigilant as caregivers. And we want to do everything we can because our life feels so out of control because we couldn't stop the stroke. Really important, though, again, to ask for help, to not feel like you have to do everything. There's significant risk to caregivers. When we put too much on our own shoulders, our cortisol levels go way, way up. That's a stress hormone, and it actually puts us at our own, increases our own health risks. Okay, so please try to reach out when you're feeling like you need something. Okay, next slide. Just in terms of the brain, I don't know for each of you how much your doctor shared with you when they diagnosed and said, okay, you've had a stroke. I put the picture up just to let you know that the language center, which is in the frontal lobe, there's a lot of other things that frontal lobe also does. It looks after reasoning, planning, language, long-term memory, impulse control, problem solving, emotions, judgment, motor functioning, initiation, and social and sexual behaviors. What does that all mean? It means that there's going to be times where, for caregivers, but also for the person who's had a stroke, you may wonder, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? Or why am I responding differently? Or why is he or she responding differently than they used to? It may be that there is that brain injury in the frontal lobe that may be impacting something besides the language center. And so when you see these things, it'll be important. Talk to your physician, talk to your speech therapist, your physiotherapist, your occupational therapist, your social worker, because there may be reasons why things are happening, and it helps to lessen, I think, a little bit of the frustration that you might be experiencing, just by helping to understand the brain and how it works. Next slide. Okay, so just in terms of what can we do to help each other? So specifically, when you're as a caregiver, when you're talking to your partners, or when you're talking to family or friends that have had strokes, really important, slow down. I am very aware I'm speaking faster today on this webinar than I would normally speak if I was sitting with a group of people with aphasia. So slow down. That way you give the other person more of a chance that they're going to take in and absorb and comprehend what it is you're trying to say. It's also for the person with aphasia. There's a lot of pressure that people feel, when they want, especially around family gatherings, they want to talk, but they don't want to slow the conversation down. They don't want to interrupt. And so there's this need this idea that you have to jump in. It's okay to just put up your hand. It's like a stop sign almost. It helps everyone in the room to slow down a little bit, and then the person with aphasia can speak. Right? Be patient. Patience is something that I think we all need. So whether you're the person with aphasia or the family member or the friend, we all need to be very patient. Let people know it's okay if it takes a little bit more time. I'm here for you. You're important to me. What you're trying to communicate is something that I value, and I want to hear you. So just be patient. That said, there will be times where there is frustration. For people that pre-stroke, they could say, anything they wanted. They could do anything. You know, you didn't have to think, it just kind of popped out in a second. And now those words get stuck, right? They're up there, you can see them in your brain, but you just can't get them out. So there is frustration. And again, is to acknowledge that this is not easy, but I'm gonna wait, and I'm here for you. Even if you want to take time and then come back an hour or 2 hours later to be able to finish what it is that you want to tell. Kind of a takeaway message for everyone is that the way that we connect with each other, the attachments that we have with each other, and the way that we communicate the value that we hold for people in our lives, it can look different, right? Everyone is not the same. And so when you're talking about how we show the other person in our life that they're important to us, some people, they do want to cook meals, right? Baking, cooking, keeping a really clean house. Those are how we show people that we love them. Other people, it's about buying things. So if you have a partner or family member who is always going to send you cards in the mail or buy gifts and bring you things, you know, you're both trying to express your appreciation and your love for the other one, but it's done in a slightly different way, right? And then I'm going to just end with the last slide, which is, it's just kind of a thought, right? Which is, she did not need, so he did not need much, wanted very little. A kind word, sincerity, fresh air, clean water, a garden, kisses, books to read, sheltering arms, a cozy bed, and to love and be loved in return. And it really is my takeaway message that it's not so much about what you do. You know, you're going to hear from lots of different professionals the things that you have to do. I think, as Glenn said, this idea that that any improvement post-stroke is going to happen within so many weeks or so many months, or it's lost. So people become very vigilant that they have to do. And again, I am going to suggest to you, I see growth and improvement over many years, just as Glenn was saying. And I think often it happens when people they feel loved, they feel cared for, and they know that there's other people, whether it's their family or friends, or whether it's other people in their groups. If you're have a center like mine, where people are coming together to in communications groups, is when people feel appreciated, their self-esteem improves, their depression diminishes, and they just do better. All right. So thank you very much for letting me join you today.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. And we're going to move to our next speaker, Tina Vallentin, who is a speech-language pathologist at Hamilton Health Sciences. And I just want to remind everyone before Tina starts that if you have questions, please do put them into the question box. We will have time for Q&A session after we hear from Tina. So Tina, if you could share your video and your audio.
I have. Okay, good afternoon. And again, I want to thank Glenn and Judy for sharing their story. It's so important, as he said, to understand how stroke, and in particular aphasia, is experienced. And just want to start with another brief definition of aphasia, but really a distinction I want to make between the traditional definition, which really focuses on the impairment of language, affecting reading and writing and listening and talking, to a more recent sort of focus that actually is broader and recognizes aphasia really also the impact on communication, identity, and relationships, right? So much broader than just specific language concerns. And I also want to be clear that aphasia in itself does not affect intelligence. Someone with aphasia does remain a competent person, and that's important. And actually the rest of what we're going to talk about hinges on acknowledging a person's competency. Okay, next slide. Okay. So communication is not one-sided or done in isolation, right? It's a partnership between the talker and the listener. The partnership includes wanting to understand what the other person wants to say and encouraging turn-taking. And I also want to talk about the difference between a transaction and an interaction. For example, if you're paying at an automatic checkout, that's a transaction between you and a machine. But if you go to a cashier to pay for your services, your purchases, then there really should be a difference, right? There should be some kind of acknowledgement that you're a person, whether that might be a smile, eye contact, perhaps even a how are you, right? So we need to remember that much about conversation is connecting, not just exchanging data. But aphasia does put up barriers to conversations. But what we want to focus on is that a skilled partner can make conversation accessible in the same way that a ramp would allow someone with a mobility issue to enter a building. So what are the skills that can help a conversation partner become a ramp for someone with aphasia? And so what we're going to do is consider a communication kit. So a set of tools and techniques that can help you as a communication partner. Next slide. So before we start choosing what tools to put in our kit, I do want to consider a few things, right? So again, we want to understand your loved one's strengths, right? So think about their abilities in terms of their languages, reading and writing and talking and listening, right? Because knowing that will help you decide what tools and techniques will be the most beneficial. Also, as a partner, remember you're using these tools to have a successful exchange. It's not about grammar or correctness. You want to understand, be understood, and connect. Okay. And using a communication kit will take practice because it's a new way of interacting, and you'll need to think about not only what you want to say, but also about a process. So the Aphasia Institute uses these 3 steps. Number 1, what can I do to help ensure that my message is understood? That is to say, get the message in. Number 2, what can I do that will help my loved one express him or herself? That is getting the message out. And number 3, am I sure that I've understood or been understood? And that's the verified component. Do you need to check it out? Okay. There's also no step-by-step guide. Every person's communication strengths will be unique. And you never really know what direction a conversation might take. Okay. And as Evelyn was talking about, sometimes really no matter your effort, there will be times where the communication exchange may fail, right? But do your best to keep your sense of humor and ask if it's okay to take a break before the frustration becomes too much. Right? But make sure you do go back and try again later. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here's a communication kit. So these are some of the tools that can help your loved one get the message in. Okay? So when we talk, we want to use plain language, expressing one idea or question at a time, right? Using natural intonation, pacing, and volume. right? And the rest of the techniques are can be used in combination with your words. So you can add gestures to what you're saying, be very expressive with your face and body language. You can add writing or do a simple line drawing to augment your speech as well. Okay, and then there's some pictographic or visual tools that we will talk about just a little bit more in depth briefly, shortly. Sorry. Next slide. Okay, and so here are some of those tools. Oh, sorry, can you go back one? So these are the tools to get the message out. So that is to help your loved one express him or herself, right? So firstly, we need to be good listeners. So we need to listen not only with our ears, right? So the words, the sentences, the intonation, but we also need to listen with our eyes. Right? What are the nonverbals? What are they saying with their facial expressions or body language? What do you see in the environment? What might they be pointing to or looking at? Right? We also need to engage our mind. What do we know about the topic? What shared information, background information do we have? And then most importantly, again, as Evelyn was saying, that we do need to listen with our heart. And that's demonstrating patience and respect. Okay. At the same time, it's also helpful to listen loosely in the sense, don't interrupt, don't get stuck on a specific word because word substitutions are common. Accept errors if you understand the key message that they're trying to share. Okay. Make sure when you're asking questions that you're using just one idea. For example, saying, do you want to go shopping at the mall is actually two ideas. Instead, you might want to ask, do you want to go shopping? And then based on that response, you can follow up. If it is yes, then provide some options. And again, always remember to give extra time. The brain likely takes longer now to understand or generate a response. Processing language takes a lot more effort and it can lead to fatigue, much like physical exercise. Always have paper with a marker or pencil available for both you and the person you're talking with. This gives you the option of writing down choices that they can point to, and it gives them the option of writing or drawing to help you understand the message. And sometimes it's helpful to prompt a suggestion. Perhaps you might say, please show me. Give me a clue. Okay. And again, I've listed the pictographic tools that can help not only with getting the message in, but also the message out. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, so here are two examples of how to use writing. So the first is providing written choices. So you can start with a simplified question. Talk about, right? And then as you provide some options, you can write them down as you say it. Say it as you write it down. A dog, vacation, concert, and so on. And then the written list won't disappear like your words. And so your loved one can point to their choice. And secondly, here's an example of keyword writing. So we can understand that this is a conversation about gardening, right? So the conversation partner has helped the person with aphasia express that they have flowers, not herbs or vegetables in their garden. They are growing red and white tulips and white hydrangeas. And by providing a line scale, they were also able to allow that person with aphasia to comment on the level of effort it takes to maintain those tulips. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here I just want to talk a little bit about those pictographic or visual tools for your communication kit. So for example, if I want to get the message in, help get the message in, if I'm talking about a person, well, it's helpful to show a photo of that person. When I'm talking about a place, perhaps I might show the flyer of the grocery store that I'm headed to, or point to a place on a map that I'd like us to visit next on a vacation. Okay. When I'm talking about a date, for example, your next doctor's appointment is in June, I can point to that on the calendar. Okay, and when we ask questions, we can also think about what are the questions we're asking and provide tools that can help them answer that question. So if you ask a who question, who would you like to visit? Then you can display photos of family and friends and ask them to point. If you are asking a where question, where would you like to go today? Offer location options, local parks, favorite restaurants, stores. If you ask when is your appointment? Or when would you like me to book your appointment? You can bring the calendar into the conversation place. Okay. So putting together a collection of pictographic tools like this is typically called a communication book. So often families will gather these pages together in a binder or folder to keep them organized and readily available. So I've included a list of possible topics as a starting point. Many communication pages are available online, and there will be some in the resource section that you can look for. The last item on the list is what's often called a life book, a type of scrapbook that includes early life, milestones, hobbies, interests, and a video to explain more about how to create a life book will be made available on the Heart and Stroke YouTube channel. Okay, next slide. So this slide is here just as a reference. What I want to highlight is that conversation therapy, supported conversation techniques, and aphasia-friendly materials, all those things that we've discussed today, are included in stroke best practices. Okay, and the last slide. And so the key messages, 3 key messages. Communication is a partnership. Want to work to build a communication kit. And follow 3 steps in your conversations, right? Give a clear message, provide a way to answer or ask questions, and check to make sure that you've understood. Okay, and I think the resource is next. So here's just some other options here for you to get some more information, and some excellent websites and some apps. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina. I'm going to ask all of our guests now to turn their cameras back on as well as their audio. And we're going to go through a Q&A. Hi there.
Hi.
Okay, so I'm going to go to questions. Just a reminder too that we are taping this, so if there's any slides you want to go back to, you'll have the ability afterwards on our website. So this first question, maybe if you guys could just mute until I finish the question. Aphasia has changed my relationship with my spouse a great deal. I feel we are still equals, but my partner feels dependent on me, and that feels like an unbalanced situation to her. How can we feel more balanced together with aphasia?
So that is, I think, one, it's such a normal response, right? I think that it's almost a universal response to stroke, but also to a lot of illnesses. And what I think it's not about the exact thing that you do, but rather to be able to be there together and to be with your partner and show them that they matter and that they're still, you still value them so much, whether they've had a stroke or not, right? That the person that you loved before is still right there, right? And then it is to, like I said, to focus more on what are the strengths, what can you bring to the relationship rather than what aren't you able to do. And I'm going to say, because I think Glenn really highlighted this, what can't you do today? Because that may change. And 6 months from now, what you're not able to do, you may find you're doing it a little bit, right?
Glenn and Judy, I'm wondering if there's anything you'd like to add. Okay, maybe their audio is off. We'll come back to that. The second question.
Sorry, let me go to that.
Oh,
Sorry.
Oh, great, no problem.
Okay. So the balanced piece, our relationship is really different than it was before, but it's just as good. In fact, it's better than it was before because we take time for each other. We're not running off and doing our separate things all the time. We're together a lot more. We've spent a lot of time together. Sometimes it is just appropriate to sit and listen and talk, and it does take more time to communicate, and you got to take that time. And if we're constantly impatient, it's not going to work. I can't imagine what it would have been like if, like I had retired early. I was 60 when I retired, and we had retired to live a certain way of life that we had planned. And 3 months later, Judy had her stroke. And so everything was upside down. And we had to reevaluate everything. And it wasn't exactly what we wanted. But our normal is our new normal. And our time is our new time. And you need to take the time and make the effort. And we're still doing that all the time. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Glenn. And I just need to tell Glenn and Judy that there's so many comments in here just saying thank you so much for sharing your story. You're so inspirational and just helping us get hope. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask, I know we're nearly at the end, I'm going to ask one more question. Just the technical difficulties, I'm adding a couple more minutes here. If people need to leave, you can watch this later. Are the subscription-based mobile aphasia apps worth the money? Tina, do you want to take that?
Sure, I can comment. I mean, I think the answer is maybe. I think that I've used them with patients very successfully, but I think what's important is that you have the right app. So it's something that targets the things that you are interested in and it's meaningful for that person with aphasia. And secondly, if that person with aphasia is interested in using them, because they can be costly if they're not being used.
I think we're going to have to stop now. Sorry, it's very sad. This has been so fantastic. Thank you to all of our guests, Evelyn, Tina, Glenn, and Judy, for sharing your perspectives and insights. I hope this gives people some extra tools to take away from them, and hopefully you can use some of them today in your daily communication. So thanks again. Just a last note to fill out our survey that we talked about, and also that we do have online communities, one for caregivers and one for people with lived experience. And we urge you to join, because I think the key message today is sometimes we just be there, and those are perfect opportunities for you to connect with others going through the same thing. So thanks, everyone.